Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships.
Hello and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I'm going to talk about the ups and downs of online dating. From time to time, I touch on this subject, and I graze across it because I get questions about it, and this one actually came as a suggestion to talk about some more. So I outlined a few things specific, and I'm just going to kind of dive right in. Online dating, just for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, it's basically a way in which it gives you an opportunity to connect with someone else that you probably don't know. The dating portion of it, now we can get into a conversation about what dating really is, but what I describe as dating is the fact that you go out with someone. And it doesn't even have to have a purpose in terms of intimacy. You know, some people date for the reason of trying to find a partner. And that's a pretty common perception about what dating is. But I tend to look at it in more broader terms, because some people don't necessarily intend to look for a partner in terms of a mate, but just want to get together with people, and you can go online and do that. And there are lots of websites, but so that's part of a definition of it. But to get to the topic that I'm discussing here, which is the online dating and that of finding a partner or someone that you can do things with and say going towards the direction of romance. You know, I'm not just talking about book clubs and going hiking and things like that. Of course, those can be considered dates. But for the description of online dating, I think most people come away with the idea of finding someone that you can relate to on a one-on-one basis, or maybe several someones that you can relate to. But that's the several someones, that's another topic we can cover at another time. But it's about online dating is about finding a potential partner, where if you just do this on your own, the chances of finding someone that you might connect with or that you would connect with is a big challenge. Because if you're not in a place where single people are at, then how do you come across meeting someone? Sometimes you have friends who could set you up, and that's not always that's not a bad choice. And the reason I say that is friends tend to know you pretty well. And if you allow your friends to screen potential people that you would go out with, sometimes they do a really, really good job of selecting individuals. The fact that they've screened them, they know that they want to give somebody of quality. Whereas when we ourselves, and I'm going to just use me as an example, I might see somebody who I feel I'm really attracted to, and I could be blind to all of the things that I should probably see because I'm just really fixated on how this person looks and sounds, and it probably fits a perception in my head of someone I'm looking for. Whereas if I were to, say, have a friend introduce me to someone, they've already done that work for me in my behalf. And so friends could be a good option as far as someone finding another person for you. But there and again, how often does that work out? Sometimes it does. But the sheer number of people that you might have the opportunity to meet can be very limited because there's only so much time. So the online thing utilizes a computer. You go to a website, and a website is going to have profiles, which is what we sort of call a biography. It's going to have pictures. It's going to have information. And on the website, you can then select people who fit your criteria, meaning it might be age, it might be height, it might be hair color, it might be eye color. You know, there are lots of things, and I'll talk about that in a little bit too. But there are lots of ways in which you can begin to select people that you would be interested in. You know how I kind of gave the description in much like I might really be attracted to somebody because of how they look. Websites give you this option to do that as well. So sometimes we might find ourselves doing the same thing as if we were looking for somebody who's attractive to us, just like we did when we saw the one person in the grocery store. But we can do it exponentially on a website because there are so many people to choose from. But, continuing on, and the reason I'm describing this in such detail is because there are people out there who may not have ever used online dating before. They've heard about it. They've heard of individuals who've had some success with it and could be curious about it. So I sort of describe it this way, and I will get into some more nuts and bolts about how it operates in a little bit. But as you work through the profile itself and find individuals that you might be interested in, then you go through the process of contacting them. And this is where the interesting part begins. I mean, it's not just that you're looking for someone, but then when you actually start to reach out and communicate with someone who would be interesting to you, you get their feedback. And then you carry it further. I think one of the nice things about having a website is they are the intermediary. You respond to them through the website in like an email. They read it. They respond back to you. So you don't have to. So it's safe. So you don't have to give your personal information. If you, say, met somebody in the grocery store, you might not really have an opportunity to fully vet this person. You haven't had time to do all of that before, say, maybe you give a phone number or something like that. And you never know how that's going to go. It's always sort of a toss-up. You don't know which way it's going to go. But if you do it through a website, then you kind of have some safety involved in that. Now, remember, you've probably only seen a picture if they've included a picture in their profile. But still, you have this idea of who you're communicating with, and you're doing it through the website, so it's relatively safe. And when the time comes that you feel comfortable about sharing personal information, say such as a phone number or maybe a personal email, so that you can take your conversation with them offline or make it so that you don't have to go through the website, because that could be a little bit clunky. Now, again, there's the safety factor in that you don't have to divulge too much. You sort of get to hide behind your side of the screen until you feel comfortable, and then you share more information about yourself. And if you get to a point where you want to, say, share your phone number or your email, then you find out where it goes from there. So one of the things that online dating provides for you is a certain amount of safety and security. Like I said, you create a profile, you start reading things, you respond, you can do things through the website. And even when you share your number, maybe you get a a second phone number. Maybe you get something very specific to that, so you don't necessarily compromise a whole lot of personal information. But you can do this from the safety and security of where you're at. And then as you develop trust with that person, then maybe you can divulge more information about you and possibly meet the person you have shown some interest in. Okay, I will take a break right now, and I'm going to talk about this some more.
The GSMC Sex Podcast is a show that examines all aspects of sexuality, from physical to emotional to spiritual. Join our hosts as they discuss age-old questions, common misconceptions, and the latest topics surrounding sex. They'll tackle topics about sexuality from the complicated to the hilarious and everything in between. GSMC Sex Podcast is your show for all of your questions about sex, even some you might not have thought of yet. Download the GSMC Sex Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you can find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hello, and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I'm talking about the ups and downs of online dating. I've talked about this in bits and pieces in past podcasts, but I've sort of compiled a few things that I wanted to talk about specifically in this one. And online dating, it ups the number of potential partners as compared to who you might meet in everyday life. And with the online dating thing, you can scan hundreds of profiles and also from many websites, from the privacy and convenience of wherever you're at. It could be your home, it could be your smartphone sitting in a car, or your tablet, or wherever you are located. And basically online dating is just like meeting someone who has created an electronic profile, and the profile itself is a compilation of information that the person shares about him or herself. And the information usually comes with a few specifics, a few specific questions that the website, who is the host, and they like each of their profile persons to answer, so that they can then create in their database a way of being searched. So some of the specifics would be, say, their height, their hair color, the color of their eyes, their ethnicity, whether they're male or female, their body type, tall, short, thin, heavy, whether you have kids, pets, hobbies, and you get somewhere on that profile room to put a very specific information about yourself, such as what your preferences are, meaning the person who's written the profile, so that when somebody runs across this profile, you can read that and see if there is interest, if there's a match. So you write some things about yourself, such as who you're looking for, where you are located geographically. That's another something that's put on the profile, because granted, if you live in one town, you may be specifically looking for people who are within a certain radius. And the reason we put in a location or our preferences, you may want somebody who, say, is within 10 miles of you, or 20 miles. Or if you're more adventurous or more flexible to that, maybe you wouldn't mind if somebody lived within a 50 or 60 mile radius of you, because some people are travelers, and that's just one of the options that you can put in the profile. And that's a very important thing to consider, because some people like an individual who has close proximity. It might afford more opportunity to meet. on an ongoing basis, whereas other individuals who don't necessarily have that as a criteria, it might not be something that they're that concerned about. And one of the reasons why somebody might be real specific about the geography is, let's say that they've dated and availability was an issue. If geographically they weren't close, that might be something that they want to be very specific about having that access, having that availability. So that's just some of the psychology about why people answer questions the way they do. Something else that you might think about is your age range. Because we are all individuals, we have our own preferences, and that's something to certainly consider. Some people are open to relocating. And again, these are the kinds of things that you can put in your profile. And on the flip side to that, if you're someone who is searching profiles, you can be very specific. Like I said, you can look for people that are of a certain age, people who are of a certain geographical region, a certain height, certain hair color, eye color, whether they have kids or not. And many websites also will give the person an opportunity to list their salary range. For some people, that's a very important consideration. Then you'll want to know that about your potential partner. And, speaking of the money aspect, and this is something that we should be mindful of. If it's a website, likely by now, if you've posted a profile on these websites, there is a cost involved. Maybe not so much to create the profile, but in order to get access to whatever people might respond to your profile. And this is where the money thing happens. So there's a cost involved, and usually you can see what that is up front. And some websites, they'll give you an opportunity to kind of bundle these things. You can do it for a month, a trial period like that, or you might do it for 3 months, 6 months, a year. You can pay all that up front. And it seems like the longer you keep your profile active on the website, and you can always go in and update these things, but they tend to give you a break, because if you do it for a month, they're going to try to get the most money out of you. And if you do it for 3 months, then it costs a little less. 6 months, a little less, again, per month. And if you do it a year, a little less per month on that. Now, it costs more than it would for 1 month. But again, you just look at it in terms of it costs less per month than a 1 month membership. So that's something to keep in mind when you do that. And from what I understand, now, I haven't done this kind of thing a lot, but from what I understand, if you choose to end your subscription or suspend it or for any reason, let's say, for example, you've met somebody that you're interested in. Now, if this means that you want to stop your profile altogether, you want to read the fine print and see if you're due a refund, something like that. And maybe they will pause your subscription, meaning that if you meet somebody after the first month and you've paid for 3 months, then you've got 2 months in the bank. So if you come back in a couple weeks and say, you decided you don't want to be with that person, well, maybe your subscription will pick up for 2 more months after that. Again, read the fine print, see what it says, understand that. And of the profiles, companies that I've read, a lot of them have more of an email kind of thing. I don't know how easy it is to actually speak to a live person if you have a problem. And you might get information from your friends as to what websites they may have used, if anybody has. And, get some good answers with that. Because if you know somebody who's had some success with meeting someone on a website, then that might be a good place to start. Like I said, there are all kinds of websites. There's websites that are geared towards specific religions. There's Christian dating websites. There's websites that are, geared towards specific ethnicities, and which isn't to say that you can't join that website. It's just that if you're looking for a particular kind of individual, then maybe you might not be of that ethnicity, but you can join anyway and find people of that culture. That might be more interesting. That might be a little more flavor for you. So there's lots of options when it comes to that. But again, it's really all about taking that leap and investing in your own life in a way that maybe you haven't before. And it takes some courage to do that. So I believe in feeding your courage and not your critic. So I'm going to talk about that and some more on the websites in a moment.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello, and we're back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I'm talking about the ups and downs of online dating. Now, the dating part of it seems to be what we're after, but all the lead up to that is, how we get to meet somebody, and then we want to vet that individual before we start to put a lot of quality time into them. And websites offer a lot of possibilities. There's lots of people available in a very short amount of time. You can go through their profiles, you can look at them, you can read something about them, and learn quite a bit about an individual. So some of the downsides to this, and this is pretty much with anything that you would find on a website or the internet. First of all, you have to trust that what the person is putting out there is accurate. And when it comes to photographs, I think one of the big pet peeves that many people have is that the photographs seem to be old and dated in a lot of profiles. So it's hard to trust that. When you meet that person face to face, you know exactly what you've got. It's right there in front of you. But when you're looking at it on a computer screen, then, you just have to trust what's there, at least enough to let your defenses down to want to invest time and effort into it. And you just hope that the people are being honest and truthful, as much as you would hope that when you represent something, that it's exactly as stated. So that's one of the downsides to internet dating. And what gets put on a profile about an individual, so there's the photographs, which I just mentioned. A lot of people have put photographs of themselves many years old. And, you wonder sometimes, do these people really think that they look like this? And how disappointing it is when it turns out that they are nothing like the photograph, but it even makes you feel like you've been defrauded. And that happens quite often in these. There's the other thing about the age. People are looking for someone of a certain age range, and sometimes because I can go to a lot of reasons, but people feel rejected for whatever reasons they have, and they will understate their age because they are looking for someone who is more available. So let's say if you're older and you feel like you might be discriminated against because no one is going to want somebody of your age range, you might lower your number. Well, some people can pull that off, but a lot of people can't. And when you go and meet that person and they don't look anything near their age, that can be a bit of a turnoff. So that's one of the downsides to this. And for what it's worth, you have to, I think, be a good consumer. Think about the website, think about how much you spend, and if you feel like you're not getting your money's worth, then it may really be time to pull up stakes and find another website. One of the other things that I have seen on in many occasions is that sometimes the profiles are very old. They're not even recent. It's just part of the mosaic of profiles that you see as you screen past them, and you may not even get a response. You may see something in a profile that's very interesting to you, and you reach out, you send a couple of messages, you don't get a response. So you may feel a sense of rejection, and that's a part of this too. You may feel rejected because you don't get a response. Some people are very good at saying, hey, this isn't you're not quite somebody I'm interested in, but good luck in your search, keep finding. At least you get that in some cases. But in other cases, you might not get a response at all. And, sometimes that's just people in general. But the other side to that is a lot of websites have profiles that are no longer active, but they just have the photographs there. And it's there to, I think, just to generate traffic, to generate income. I really feel like they should comb through their profiles just to know that if these profiles are inactive, then they should pull them or make it very clear that this profile has not been accessed for a period of time. That way you are very clear about what could be the expectation, that you may put out an inquiry and you may not get any response. I mean, if the profile hasn't been accessed in, say, 2 or 3 days, people take time off. But if it's been a couple of months, then, the likelihood that they're going to get back to you could hinge on just a wild guess. And at least if you see that right there on the profile, then you know. Like I mentioned, the cost of this can really ratchet up the whole thing about the online portion of it, because websites charge what they charge, but you definitely want to monitor your money so that you don't spend more than you think it's worth. And you have to decide for yourself what it's worth. There is the safety and security of being able to do things in the way of a profile and meeting people that way. And so, and there's a bit of anonymity and you do it that way. And if it works out, then you go forward. If it doesn't, then you can just end it. And that works for a lot of people. But you also have to have some bit of, some strength emotionally to handle the rejection. Like I say, you can put out there that you're interested in meeting people, and they just may, you may find out that maybe you're attracted to a certain type that's not a good fit for you. So you need to know something about yourself and do the inner work so that when you start on the profiles, you can pick people who are more in line with where you're going and where you want to be. See, one of the traps here is it's easy to find people that you're attracted to or have been attracted to at one time and sort of create this opportunity to do over some of your past. And hopefully with the changing of your status from the last relationship to where you are now, that there's been a growth factor. So again, you think about where you are and where you want to go. So obviously, dating profiles have, there's a lot of mystery to it, which makes it interesting. And you have to have some vulnerability to want to put yourself out there. But, there's something to be gained, or else these websites, online profiles wouldn't exist. So it takes a bit of courage to put yourself out there and want to find somebody. And there are many, many success stories. I know there's all kinds of reasons to be cautious. And if it's something you've never done, generally there's going to be some anxiety around doing it. There's going to be some fears. But with just a little thought and, some being reasonable about it, I think you can venture into creating an online profile that represents you and put in a couple of pictures. And I think one of the things to think about when you start sharing photographs, and this is something I've talked about at length in other segments, in other podcasts, is be accurate with what you're representing in terms of have a photograph that's recent. Another thing is take a photograph of yourself. Oftentimes people will use photographs that have lots of people in them, and it could be very difficult to discern which individual we're talking about in terms of the profile. Think about, and the reason I say have a photograph with just yourself is I think having photographs of objects, pictures of your vacation and things like that, that's something you can share one-on-one with the individual once you have decided you want to be in contact with them. Because we get that you're artistic and creative. You can write those things in your profile, but putting a bunch of pictures of these things tends to be a waste of a lot of people's time. Think about it from the standpoint of the person you were trying to attract. A picture of yourself is going to hold their interest much, much longer than just a picture of a bunch of objects. So I've just about come to the end of my time. And so I was talking about some of the ups and downs of online dating, and I hope I've covered enough of the topic to at least give, take some of the mystery out of it. And if it's something that you've been considering because you've never done it before, then, put some time into it. Do a little research and, see if it'll work. And if it's something that you have done before, I think you'll find that most of what I've said is right on point. And maybe a few new things that you hadn't considered, at least in terms of how to make these work for you, and how to create a profile that really represents you and attracts the kind of people that you're interested in. I'm John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. Thank you for listening.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.